Good afternoon. I am Cassie Bradley. I'm the Credit for Prior Learning Coordinator for EKU. And this session today is called Casting the Narrative for CPL at EKU. And we're going to be looking at ways that we can transform the value of student experiences and their prior achievements. This session is being recorded so that if you are watching this after the session, feel free to reach out and let me know if you have any questions about the materials. And then also let me know that you've watched it so that I can go into your PD transcript, your professional development transcript that is on file with the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning to make sure that you receive credit for that. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay, so again, the session is casting the narrative for CPL at EKU, transforming the way that we value student experiences and achievements. When we say CPL, we're talking about credit for prior learning. And credit for prior learning is just exactly what the subtitle says. We're recognizing student experiences and achievements and finding ways that we can align that with academic credit. We're usually looking at those non-collegiate, non-college level Title IV granting institutions. So you may have some licensures, your students may have licensures or specific specialized trainings, credentials, certifications. And so those are non-collegiate experiences, but they're very beneficial not only to their course of study, but also in bringing that information that they have out in the field into our classroom. It really enriches our classrooms. So we want to recognize and celebrate those and see how those can align with our academic courses in their programs of study, and see how we can recognize that learning through collegiate credit and having that applied to their transcript. So our session objectives for this session, we're going to explore the impact of credit for prior learning on student success and institutional goals. We're going to look at switching or shifting a narrative from deficit-based to asset-based thinking. This is not really the climate that we're in right now. With the creation of my role as a full-time credit for prior learning coordinator, and I believe last I checked, I'm the only one in the state that actually has their full-time responsibilities dedicated to credit for prior learning. Everybody else, it seems like it's attached to another part of their job or based on what's going on at their university. So over the last year or so, I think that the shift that we could have from deficit based, like what are the negative connotations and myths about credit for prior learning, I think we're shifting that to where like how can we just incorporate this into our program. So, but I'm going to touch base on that because there's still some areas out there of the university that are not touched with credit for prior learning just because we haven't had the experience yet. And then lastly, we're going to collaborate to identify opportunities and on how to integrate credit for prior learning into your role at the university. So again, we talked briefly about this at the opening. So credit for prior learning recognizes these educational experiences outside of college setting. Those are non-collegiate. And that could take the form of workplace experience, military service, specialized high school coursework, standardized exams. CLEP, also credit for prior learning, is an umbrella term. So there's all of these different things that fall under that. It could be CLEP, it could AP is considered credit for non-collegiate or credit for prior learning because it's not collegiate level instruction. And then we also have dual credit falls under that umbrella. I don't deal specifically with that, but it's also those types of learning experiences that have occurred outside of a college level classroom. But what comes to mind when you hear credit for prior learning? If you want to share, you can, but just think about what comes to your mind. And I know I spoke briefly with Wayne prior to the session starting. Liz, I know that you're deeply embedded into credit for prior learning and the articulation of those credits and things. Um, and Wayne was saying that he also works with current student, yes, the JST and the ACE credits. Wayne has commented about the JST, that's the Joint Services Transcript, and the American Council for Education. There are some deep nuances with that we're tackling here at the university. The JST is military level experience, and a lot of times all of that can come in and it's sitting in a student's free electives, and the American Council on Education, they make those recommendations on what type of military experience can be applied. But then again, that's just a recommendation that ACE awards. We're looking at shifting that to where the student can let us know what they want applied to their transcript, because it's not specifically, we don't have to automatically apply the JST credits, the military credits. It is a recommendation. We have to have the JST on file for certain military benefits, but it certainly doesn't have to be applied. And we definitely don't want to cause a student to get in danger of SAP warning or issues with their financial aid. So we're trying to move to a more efficient process of that. And we'll talk more about that in one of the later sessions related to military experience. Thanks for bringing that up, Wayne.
For me,
Um,
I consider opportunity is what I hear with credit for prior learning. Like you said, I my dissertation topic is actually about getting a public agreement in Kentucky. And so through all the research, it's just for me, it's an opportunity to bring students in that maybe never thought about college before. And as I'm sure you'll talk about, but a lot of the research says if we can even give them just 3 credit hours of something, they see the value in that and they get invested with us. And I know you have many stories about people that we invested in. They went somewhere else and then we're like, nope, we want to come back to you guys because you guys helped us with this.
there's a lot of research out there, nationwide, worldwide. They're doing some other places. It's called recognition of prior learning. That's kind of the international one. Prior learning assessment is another form of it. But yes, there's lots of experiences. Obviously, they haven't had maybe when they were younger. I know this was the case with me. They didn't know the value of their college level credential until they got out in the workforce and they realized, okay, I need to come back and do this. And so even giving them that one credit, sometimes it's like it lets the student know we do value that. And the knowledge that you have is important, and it's important enough to be counted as college level credit. And a lot of times that's just what they need, that reinforcement, that support to get them back into a classroom. And then um, they can focus on um, what they want to do and the classes without having to relearn things that they already know and have experience at. How this fits into our strategic plan at EKU, it's a mechanism to advance the knowledge, transform lives, and inspire innovation, which fits completely right into our strategic plan at EKU, not only with our university, but with our community partners as well. Thank you all for sharing. So these are some of this is some of the research. Just kind of delves into it, and I didn't have a chance to add it. I was telling Wayne yesterday, I was at the University of Louisville, and we were doing some presentations over there, and a couple of the ambassadors from CALE, which is our National Adult and Experiential Learning group. One of the newer research that they said is when what they had done this poll, and I forget the number of students. It was, you know, thousands of students, and they asked what they're looking for, especially those non or post traditional aged students, what they're looking for, adult learners, when they come back to a university. And I think it was something like 84 or 64% of them said they are looking for those credit for prior learning experiences, and that would play a strong point in choosing a university when they come back to the university. And I'll share that research in my follow-up email. But students are out there, they're out there looking. They're looking for how it can benefit them. And at EKU, we kind of have a benefit over some of the other ones. I've gotten tons of calls from students who are shopping to find out how, what opportunities we have. and the cost associated with it. And EKU currently, we're not charging for credit for prior learning. We haven't had a whole lot of portfolio requests, and we can touch more on that later. Um, as far as the traditional portfolio for experiential learning, we haven't had a lot of those. The ones that we see a lot of are more aligned with like industry and workforce credentials. And so we do it for free. At this point, it's not as time consuming, and we found some ways to optimize our resources to make sure that we can keep that cost low, further reducing financial barriers for our students. There was a study done by Witchy, which is kind of like our SAC-COC, but in another part of the United States, another region, and Kale. And then I believe maybe the Lumina Foundation also funded some of this. And some of the benefits there were, it was a 72 institution search. Compiled of about 465,000 students. So a pretty significant number of information that went into this. So the benefits that they found, obviously, accelerated degree completion. I believe it's anywhere from 9 to 14 months. And I don't think I noted it on the credits, but I believe that was it was called the PLA Boost. And I will also send you some resources that has uh, a snapshot of that research as well as the full report if you want to read up more on that. But I believe it was anywhere from 9 to 14 months that the student shaved off of their degree time. Obviously, the cost savings are going to be significant, especially with us. Um, on average, though, there are usually some costs associated with it, but even with that, students saved anywhere from $15,000 to $10,000 in tuition. So we're reducing those financial hurdles. There's some another side of that, and I'll touch base on that here in just a second. That some universities may get scared and say we're giving away $10,000 in tuition. How can we afford to do that? And where is it coming from? And I'll get to that in just a second. So it's going to increase accessibility and flexibility. A lot of these students, they're still working. A lot of our students that we've seen that have benefited from credit for prior learning are online students, so they're out there in the workforce. They're able to use some of their experience and still continue on their path of degree completion. So this just further enhances that accessibility and flexibility. Their motivation and persistence, and the way that we measure that is through retention. On average, the degree completion rate and the retention, students who came out, according to this study, students who came in with some sort of prior learning persisted through to graduation at a rate of 49%, whereas students that came in that did not have credit for prior learning or other prior learning assessment had a degree completion rate of about 27%. So that's huge to me. Just knowing this population and appreciating the knowledge that they have has helped them to be more focused on completing their degree. And then, of course, it validates their real world experience, what they're doing out in the workforce. It validates that it is important and it's important enough to be included on your transcript and included in your degree pathway. Reduced redundancy in coursework. I think the experiences that a lot of students have in their early years, they're like, why am I doing this? And I know that you all as faculty have heard this. Why am I doing this? Why I don't understand the benefit of gen ed. There is a benefit. I'm a firm believer in the benefits of general education. They may not see it right off the bat. However, in their coursework, in their degree specific courses, they may spend a lot of time or prior to credit for prior learning they may have spent a lot of time learning things that they already know, that they've already been certified in, that they already have a licensure for. And we don't want them to spend time relearning what they already have. If they can prove that they have this knowledge, we want to move them forward so that they can go ahead and get on with their degree to where they can take those courses that are going to be beneficial in extending their knowledge. How EKU benefits. Now, I know that I said that there's a lot of cost savings affiliated with credit for prior learning, But because of that increased retention rate, we have increased enrollment and tuition dollars because on average, our credit for prior learning students, the students that come in with credit for prior learning, take an average of anywhere from 15 to 17 more credits because they haven't had to spend time relearning coursework that they already know. They're more focused on like specializations and things like that, taking those courses because of the interest of learning and extending their knowledge. So we do see some increased enrollment and tuition dollars because of that increased tuition. That increased retention. Stronger community and industry partnerships. Obviously, we are currently working with some workforce education to try to look at pathways. So, some of those workforce development certifications and training programs that they're doing just across the other side of the bypass. We're looking at ways. Are there any alignments in those non-collegiate trainings that they're doing and certifications that they're doing with courses here at EKU? I know I met with the chair of the engineering and technology program, and we're really looking at that. We're looking at ways that we can find pathways for those short-term credentials and how that can be an entryway into our programs at EKU to where they can either come back and finish a degree or start a degree program. And a lot of these folks out in the community, they're already, their employers, their industries are willing to pay for that. And so they have the opportunity through their work. They're also being able to keep a roof over their head and provide for their families, while also if we find those entry points of how we can incorporate credit for prior learning, we're just adding another benefit to our students and meeting them where they're at. Reputation for meeting students where they are. Obviously, I don't know if you all know this, but EKU is leading the way in credit for prior learning, and I had no idea until I started doing this work because I'm the only person that specifically does it full time. Now I have a team of people at the university that are so helpful and resources, the OATS team, the OMVA, the faculty, academic affairs, student affairs, the registrar's office. There's a team of people that help to keep this going. But as far as full-time credit for prior learning, I'm the only person on campus that does that full-time. And until I started interacting with the Council on Post-Secondary Education and the work that we're doing there, I didn't realize how far we were as far as getting processes in place to create efficiencies and to incorporate it into our culture here at EKU. So EKU is really has a name out there for meeting students where they're at, finding ways to value credit for prior learning and remove some of these barriers that the state is looking to do and meet state goals in allowing students with some college and no credit to come back and earn that post-secondary credential for sometimes the first times in their families. Obviously, the workforce is going to benefit from this. They're going to have enhanced skills. They're going to have retention and advancement in their programs or in their disciplines through their work. Upskilling. I was recently in a workforce development session, and a lot of those people that were in the session were from factories, and they were eager. They're so eager to learn because they've done all they can do in their training pathways, and they're looking for other ways, and their industries are willing to pay for it. So they were asking, please create more trainings for us, and we want to come, and our employers are willing to do it. So let's help them with that, and that's just going to make a better workforce for us. Not only this, something I need to add on here. We do know that when parents have a post-secondary credential, that it's more likely that their children will have those they'll go to college as well. And we know EKU, 50% of our freshmen that have come in the fall were first generation students. So if we can not only keep our students here, but if we can bring some of those students back and get that credential, we're paving the way for future students to um, be more resourceful and have more increased skills in their specific disciplines. Okay, so the institutional goals, we'll start touching on those. Obviously, all of these are right in our strategic plan and our institutional goals. Knowledge, transformation, innovation. Those are our three areas, the three large areas. And credit for prior learning fits into that perfectly because it's advancing that knowledge, and we recognize their prior learning by evaluating and assessing that to see how we can add those to the transcript. We're leveraging the diverse learning experiences with socioeconomic statuses and previous, underrepresented groups of folks by socioeconomic first generation students and andragogy. I think Wayne was talking a little bit about that before the session. Those unique needs of adult learners or post-traditional learners, and how meeting them where they're at to enhance that academic environment, not only for our classrooms, but for the student experience all over. We're dedicated to transforming the lives of our students because credit for prior learning allows for time to degree reduction and reduction in financial barriers and burdens by providing ways that we can do this for free at this point in time. We can look at ways to recognize that credit for prior learning on their transcripts. Empowering students to see the value in their prior achievements. I was talking to a student. Um, she had been a student, and life gets in the way, not in a bad way, but kids come, um, jobs happen, you have changes and shifts in your priorities, and school usually sometimes is the first ball to drop. And I'm like, you should come back and finish your degree. And she was like, "Oh, well, I just have this coding thing. It's not a big deal." I'm like, "That's a certification." And we can look at those. We have faculty we have subject matter experts and faculty that can review that and let you know that there's ways that can be valued in a degree program. And we can review that. We can definitely review it. Now, whether it's awarded or not, or there are some areas that because of their credential or their accrediting body, maybe they can't do it. But for the most part, I think that our faculty are very dedicated to seeing ways that they can benefit their students in this. And I've been pleasantly surprised at some of the areas that I didn't think would be on board that were. And I think a lot of the faculty, they want what's best for the students. So we're transforming their lives in trying to recognize, give them the motivation and support that their prior achievements are important and they're beneficial to their degree completion. We're creating equitable opportunities for students to realize their potential. Again, recognizing, supporting them and their prior achievements. Not only that, I think a lot of these students, when they hit the classroom, and Wayne, you can chime in as well, because I'm sure that you have over in your area in Homeland Security, I'm sure that you see some non-traditional aged students. Um, and how much value they bring to the classroom because a lot of our students they haven't had the opportunities to get out. Maybe they're not in the level to where they're doing internships yet. Maybe they haven't had a clinical experience. And so those non-traditional learners, when they hit the classroom and a course that they do have to have, um, then I think it enriches that classroom and they're able to share stories of what's out there, what they see. And I think that brings value to our classrooms too when they're either in our online courses or in our classrooms here on campus. And then reshaping the standard of higher education practices. Higher ed is changing. It's changed in the last um, year. It's changed in the last 6 months. One of the things I always like to say is the only constant in higher education is that it's constantly changing, and I guess that keeps us from getting bored, right? Always something to research. So we're changing the way that we're looking at our educational practices. I know credit for prior learning. I don't know how long you all have been around the university, but probably about 10, 15 years ago, there was talk of CALE and the credit for prior learning and how we can do prior learning assessment, but it never stuck. And so because it was always tagged on to interested groups, and we're always doing more with less at EKU and other universities across the nation. We're doing more with less resources, and so if it's not required of your job, a lot of times that's the first ball to drop. But again, at EKU, we have that dedicated my role. So it's showing the value that we believe in our students. We believe in the knowledge that they have, and that's one of the ways that we're reshaping that moving forward. And then, of course, the innovation, not only internal, but student facing as well. We are assessing and awarding credit for prior learning. We're streamlining processes campus wide. Prior to my role getting involved, it was there were departments and pockets of I heard it called at a meeting boutique style, which I thought was a nice way of putting it. But there were pockets of areas and disciplines that it just made sense. For prior learning made sense. A lot of them in criminal justice in the College of Justice and Safety, policing, fire and safety, OSHA, Homeland Security. Some of those that are highly industry credentialed, it made sense for that. And then there's other areas that are learning. We've recently added several agreements, academic agreements, in the College of Education, in Child and Family Studies, in foreign languages. We have a lot of different areas. We have Masters of Public Health. We have some in a lot of graduate programs. So we're transforming that, and we're trying to get a similar process to the most to the best degree that we can, so that anyone on campus can say, here's the resources. We may not be your person, but here's the resources you can reach out to. So we're streamlining those processes and enhancing on the folks that had been doing credit for prior learning and making it a more unified process to where everyone has access to the same forms. We're compiling data. We're able to collect data that way and to show how efficient we are with that. Um, Quick story, we had worked on an agreement in safety, the master's program of safety, security, and emergency management. Kim Chitwood and Tom Snod. We had gotten the agreement in place and got everything great, and the faculty reviewed on the front end, and then that way when a student came in with this certified safety professional, they're a certified safety professional, they would get nine credits of graduate level credit. And so we got the agreement in place, and the first opportunity came up, and Kim emailed me and or messaged me, and she said, I think I did something wrong. And I said, well, no, I'm looking at the form and everything looks good on there. You've attached everything. It looks good. The certification is there. The documentation is all in place. Why did you think you did something wrong? She said, well, it's too easy. So I said, no, that's a good thing. That's what our goal is in getting some of these processes and procedures in place to support efficiency of not only our students but our faculty and staff as well. Because if it's easier and more efficient for our faculty and staff to incorporate this into their daily work, they're going to be more apt to do that for students, because I think that all of our faculty and staff, they're not here to make money. They're here to help students, a lot of them, especially those that have been here for a while. And so if we can find ways to be efficient in doing that, we're going to make sure to capture all those students and to help them. And not only that, maintaining the rigorous academic standards to ensure program alignment. The key part of this, and I've mentioned this in the overview if you want to go back and watch that, the guiding star on this credit for prior learning is our academic regulation on academic credit 4.2.1. And we just recently, it went through the 10-day comment, and we added some clarity and more specifics related to credit for prior learning. But the faculty have to be the guardians of the academic credit. That's not only through our regulations and policies, that's through SAC-COC. They are the guardians. Now, they can be as creative as they want in showing in the way that the student demonstrates that alignment with their prior learning to the academic credit. but they have to be the ones that determine that. And so in that way, we are making sure that not only are we benefiting the student, but we're also maintaining our academic standards, not only to our programs, but to the disciplines themselves. And then we're also about establishing practices that evaluate that into their academic journeys. And so they can evaluate, not only do we evaluate them to see what kind of prior learning that can be applied to their transcript, but at the end of the process, we are also asking students to evaluate us and how we're doing, and we're using that feedback and that data to improve and enhance our credit for prior learning experiences at EKU. Networking, these are two, and obviously these trickle into the three areas of the strategic plan. But networking, I briefly touched on this earlier, with local, statewide, and national credit for prior learning professionals. So I'm a CALE member. That's the Council on Adult and Experiential Learning. And so there's a lot of ways that when I get stuck about what we need to do at EKU. I reach out, and there's people all over the country and actually several across the globe that are part of this CALE group. They do a lot of trainings on creative ways to be innovative in credit for prior learning. And then with the state, I'm also working with the statewide initiative. There's an initiative that is trying to collaborate with all the institutions to create modules and things like that for those universities who are new to credit for prior learning. And so EKU is developing good partnerships with our sister institutions and our two-year institutions to be a good steward for higher education and help each other. And I've learned a lot from other institutions, even two-year institutions, on the way that they accept military credit. So we're learning from each other to create a network to where credit for prior learning is just embedded into the culture of higher education. Data informed improvement. We're working on ways to evaluate not only our initiatives, but the numbers of students that this has benefited. And looking at ways we can do that through Slate. The Slate team is amazing. They do amazing work. If you haven't used Slate, it's just a wonderful product. And the benefits are endless as far as all of our students are in Slate anyway. And so some of these processes, we're looking at ways that we can do that. Not only does it make the process easier for our students, it provides transparency for the staff and faculty that are involved in helping that student, and it also allows us to collect data. And data is important in every field. Money is usually always tied to data, and we're also looking at ways that we can try to seek grant opportunities eventually, but in order to do that, you're going to have data. And so we're looking at ways that we can have that, we can document our successes and our wins and our progress in with data and support that with the data. So shifting the narrative, one of the ways, and I don't think this is so much now as it was a year ago, even. So shifting to a from a deficit based to an asset based thinking and positive messaging. And I'll go through some of the myths here in just a second, some of the myths and realities of credit for prior learning. I haven't heard a lot of these because I've worked a lot with faculty in my previous role as the FICTL program manager. Prior to that, I worked on curriculum things. And so I think that faculty genuinely want to help students if they can. And so it's my job to show them the opportunities and the different ways that they can incorporate those into their programs. So, an example of a deficit based statement would be students lack traditional coursework experience, whereas the opposite side of that, the asset based, would be students are bringing valuable skills and knowledge from workforce experience. So thinking about how will prior learning enhance student learning environments, and we talked about that briefly on how that happens. And something else to think about is what are the opportunities for the student, the institution, and program growth when you think about your programs? What are those areas that credit for prior learning could assist in growing the program? So these are just a few myths and realities that I'll share. I have heard some of these in my early days of credit for prior learning, but not as much anymore. Credit for prior learning is for non-traditional students. And the reality is that CPL benefits a wide range of learners. One of the things with credit for prior learning here at EKU, we can provide opportunities and share that information on those things that we have in place, like academic agreements and things like that. We can get those into place um, and share those with prospective students. However, when it comes to actually applying that to their degree path, we can't actually do that until they're current students. So to give you an idea, I think there was like 500 and some credit hours that had been awarded since fall to student transcripts. Those are all current students. So the majority of the students that we're hearing from are current students. We do have some that are a good chunk that are prospective students, but that's another way. Plus, with our free application for admission, that's another way to get students through the door. They're not obligated to register for classes, but a lot of times that assessment can't happen. We're not going to dedicate faculty resources, a large chunk of experiential learning, like reviewing experiential learning outcomes and things like that until they have said that they are dedicated to becoming a student at EKU, and that happens through the admissions process. Oops, let me go back. CPL is only about portfolio review. Like I said, since I've done this, as far as the traditional sense of a portfolio review, I have only seen one of those, and it was in the process when I started, where they actually looked at experience. It wasn't attached to a credential or a licensure or something like that. Because a lot, and I think this happens a lot of the time, because when we share with the student, if you have 20 years of experience in a field, we need to assess what you know, right? So we don't know always. The student is not going to know what course they could meet. The faculty may not know until they learn about the student, and that's time consuming. And so when we tell them what needs to happen, the reviews that need to happen in order to find a way for them to demonstrate that they have that course level student learning outcomes, that they've met those, a lot of times especially if they're already full-time students, they'll just take the class because they don't want to spend the time doing that. If they are, they can just take the class. Now we're working on ways that we can make that more efficient, but for now, I think that's why we haven't seen the traditional portfolio for experiential learning. We haven't seen a lot of those. Um, but that's not the only thing that we do. The majority of what we do here is we see an alignment, like a lot of students with a certain credential or a licensure or a workforce certificate. And we look at ways that those can be aligned to either a course or set of courses here. We see a lot of those. We get academic agreements in place. We see a lot of military training. I don't see a lot of the testing. The testing that I usually am involved in or know about is the departmental level testing. But Samantha Pierce and the Office of Articulation and Transfer, they see more of that CLEP and AP testing and standardized exams, and we're hoping to try to incorporate some of that data as well under that umbrella of credit for prior learning. But there's a little bit of everything. CPL diminishes the value of a degree program. That is not the case. Um, it actually maintains academic rigor by requiring the evidence. So there's no shortcut to the degree. Those students who are receiving credit um, are being recognized because they have demonstrated that they have or can meet or through some other certification have met those student learning outcomes the same at they may not have arrived in the same place in the same modality as a traditional student taking the course, but they can demonstrate that they have met those student learning outcomes. So the rigor of the course is kept intact. CPL is an easy earn. And that is not the case. They have to, again, they have to demonstrate that they've met those college level standards, often through rigorous documentation, assessments. They have to obtain their training transcripts. So there's some parts on that that even though they may have done the work or taken the courses that facilitate that, they still have to demonstrate the knowledge because we also have to keep documentation of that. Any sort of alternative credits like that, we have to keep that on file for our accreditation and compliance purposes. Students will take CPL instead of courses, reducing the institutional revenue, as shared before with the research that had been done. Um, it will often accelerate degree completion and improve our retention rate. So actually, we're bringing more money into the university, and that offsets those concerns about revenue. It's not worth the effort for advisors to promote. It actually can reduce time to degree, lower costs for students, and improve satisfaction, making it a high impact strategy. And again, once we have these agreements in place, and that's where the faculty and the advisors that are seeing these students, that they are so critical to this whole process. Um, by letting me know, hey, I'm seeing this a lot with our students, I can reach out to the faculty and be like, hey, is there a way that we can do this? That way the faculty don't have to spend the time reviewing each and every student that comes through with a set of skills. We can get an agreement in place, and then it's as simple as the advisor submitting a form when the student says, I have this credential, this is how I can prove it. And it's a form and it gets routed through the approval process and it gets added to the transcript. So win-win for the students and the faculty and staff. Students already know about CPL options. There are many students that are unaware about those, especially if there are areas that are traditionally, maybe they're not recognizing CPL yet, or maybe they aren't aware. I'm working to have conversations with chairs and deans and advisors about potential CPL opportunities for our students. But some of our students that do have those opportunities, especially in justice and safety, um, they're bringing they're a lot of those areas are letting them know when they apply for those programs. If you have this, or this, we have credit for prior learning opportunities. But some of them still aren't aware that this thing that they've been doing, this industry work that they've been doing out in the field is important. And so I think having a basic knowledge is good for all of our faculty and staff to have so that we can share those opportunities with students. Employers don't value credit for prior learning. That's not the case because it demonstrates practical knowledge. So it's not only, I've heard a lot of folks out in the industry world in factories is that they value students have a degree, but they'd really like to see more of folks that have had hands-on. So if you can combine the both experience, hands-on experience where they've had life experience, lifelong learning as well as the educational theories and the depth and breadth that comes with college level classes. That's going to further enhance our students' success and our alumni groups, and it's gonna be all around better for EKU. So, something I want to, one of the last things, and I know that some of you are faculty, some of your staff, maybe staff and advisors. These are some things I want to leave you with to think about. How can you advocate for credit for prior learning in your discipline? For staff, how can you guide students towards CPL and advisors as well? How can you advocate for credit for prior learning as an academic planning tool? Um, One of the things that we're talking about with advisors is making sure that we're routing them to advisors so that the student can have that conversation because the advisors are so critical in this piece because the advisors know the programs, they know the degrees, and we don't want to just have credit for prior learning that's just going to be sitting in free electives. Now, sometimes they just need that. They need the hours. Maybe that's all they need to finish their degree, especially if they're general studies. But sometimes it's not going to benefit their degree programs. And um, if it can't benefit their degree programs, we definitely want to make sure that their experience that we're evaluating, that we're using the faculty's time to evaluate that we're spending time, the advisor's time is well worth it and it's meeting degree completion requirements. Um, and we do that early. So as they filter in, as soon as you know about those, let us know. They don't have to wait till their last semester. We can get that in there so that when you're reviewing their degree requirements and program requirements, you can see that where that credit for prior learning recognition is showing up in their degree plan. Just something to think about. And these slides I'll send you after the session as well, so you can go back and look at them. Normally I do this session in a group of people and we do some brainstorming, but I'll just leave you with these to think about. What are your concerns about this? And please feel free to share these with me. Talk amongst them with your colleagues, and then let me know. I'm happy to come over and chat and have a session. So, what are your concerns about CPL? In a perfect world where there's no restrictions and we have plenty of faculty and we have all the staffing that we need and we don't, money is just flowing like water. What in a perfect world, what would a resolution to those concerns look like? And then what supports would be needed to help you? Just share those concerns with us. In conclusion, we've talked about the benefits of credit for prior learning. We've talked about alignment to the institutional goals. We've looked at versus deficit-based thinking. And then think about how you will support credit for prior learning at EKU. One thing that I will say, we have a series of these types of sessions. I'll send you a link of all of it's a calendar of all the events that we've done, that we have scheduled so far. Once the recording is finished, I will upload the recording onto that and you'll have that. Go back and watch that. Feel free to watch that. Feel free to register for any of the future sessions. So the overview was done last week. This is how this ties into the strategic plan. And then each session after this, I think there's one in 2 weeks, we'll look at the different parts of credit for prior learning. So we'll look at academic agreements. We'll look at matriculation and transfer. We'll look at testing, credit for prior learning by testing. We'll look at military. That one will be pretty extensive. Um, and we'll look at portfolio reviews, things like that. We'll break through each of those next sessions. Listed, it'll show all the different areas, the major headers of those credit for prior learning modalities and assessment measures. And then we'll also have a panel of professionals that will of chairs and deans, faculty that have some experience in reviewing portfolio and tips and tricks and stories. And that's a really interesting one too. I believe that's on October 30th. So be sure to check those out and let me know if you have any questions. Again, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm on the global Cassie.Bradley at eku.edu. We also have the prior learning at eku.edu. I directly report to Jennifer Weiss, which is very handy because she's our SAC COC liaison. And so we're trying to make sure we have all of the great information that you need for all of us to stay in compliance. Wayne shares, in shifting the narrative, you shared another term which was exciting to hear that I will use with my students in my scholarship. You said that post-traditional students versus the deficit-based non-traditional student term. This term, post-traditional student, resonates with our returning adult learner who has experiences that might be aligned to CPL. Employers value definitely. I have a colleague who has an entire dissertation was focused on industry and higher education partnerships after her experience in the automotive industry. Absolutely, having college graduates who still need to be unskilled of how or upskilled to work in corporate and industry environment. Absolutely. Wayne, that's something that the Council on Post-Secondary Ed is trying to work towards. Non-traditional sounds so negative, right? You're non this, non that. And so it's post-traditional. And when actuality, the definition of non-traditional learners is the age group is 25 to 60. And we have a lot of students, and I mean, a good percentage, and I'm working on getting the data. We have a lot of students who fall within that category that may not be non-traditional. I mean, it's non-traditional. What is traditional? Not normal. That doesn't sound right. So post-traditional, I think, captures that a lot better. And it sounds more positive. It's more positive. It's not a negative thing. Like, you didn't come right after school. You didn't live after high school. You didn't live on campus. That's not for everybody. And we need to recognize and celebrate those learners who are returning to academia.
And I
No, absolutely,
remember,
Cassie. I appreciate you addressing that because I think that also helps retain those individuals who are coming back after they've had a break. They went and they worked in industry. They worked somewhere. They had some credits and they want to come back to college because now maybe college wasn't for them when they first finished high school or they couldn't afford it. So that idea of post-traditional really resonates and brings them into a place where they feel that they're being respected for who they are and their
That's right.
experiences that they have prior.
That's right. That's a great point, Wayne. And we're called a post-secondary institution. What if we were a non-secondary? That it just doesn't sound right. It has a negative connotation. So I think that recognizes them where they're at. It's a post-traditional or post-secondary education, and we have post-traditional learners, and we need to reward them.
well, in our Student Success Summit that we had yesterday, they were talking about how some of like our group ages, like especially with like online, our average student's like 38. If you go to another group on campus, it's 34. So really, it's only like the first time freshmen when you get them out, it's 19. So when you think about it, we were talking mainly about like our communication strategies because there's whole generations sometimes in some of those groups. And so how you communicate
Hmm.
with one is not how you need to communicate with the other. And
Right.
that's a skill set that I think it's fascinating to see how EKU is growing in this area. And, coming from somebody that did have parents that both earned college degrees, but then working with students that are the first generation students and seeing um, what they need help with, and then also working with those coming back. They finally earned that GED in their 30s, and now they're wanting to know, well, what do I do next? Or having that factory worker say, I want to be the supervisor, but this is holding me back. So I have
Right.
15 years of experience, but they say I can't do this because I don't have these letters next to my name. And
That's
how do I
exactly
make
right.
that happen? And
Yep.
so it's very exciting to see. I love this little world that we're in.
Yeah, there's a lot of students, and I've done some. I mean, I think credit for prior learning is for all ages. We're looking a lot of those that already have the experience, and again, those graduate level when they're coming back. I'm so glad that the graduate programs and the coordinators have. They're excited about this. I presented some information to them a few weeks back, the graduate coordinators, and they're primed for receiving credit for prior learning. They're like, oh, because their students have all this experience and they're coming back for their masters. And there are ways that we can acknowledge that because they're highly skilled. And we, with on the front end of that, I've been talking with some people about the Ignite programs. We have a lot of students, and I think that high schools, it's a wonderful, if you haven't had a chance, go out and look at the Ignite programs. We have two in Madison County. Um, and they're doing some amazing things in auto mechanics and um, HVAC and engineering and some things like that. And um, a lot of those are offered initially anyway through the high schools because that might be, some kids are not into college. Maybe they don't have the support systems at home. Maybe they just think I'm not a good learner. But maybe their type of learning or the way that they learn is different because a lot of those students, because they can tap into Perkins money, are able to take these certifications and they're graduating high school with multiple certifications, industry level certifications. And so maybe it's not for them right now, but when we recognize these certifications, we're letting that learner know, hey, maybe college is for you until you get out there. Maybe you excel at some hands-on stuff. And then you get out there and you're like, well, I could manage these people. But again, like Liz said, these letters are keeping me away from it, that this document is keeping me away from it. And I know I can do this because I'm leading people. And so it's just all the way around beneficial for the workforce. We're going to have more engaged workforce. We're going to have a more engaged student population when we support them and recognize them for that learning. Thank you both for your comments. Any other thoughts, comments? I think we've taken it right to the end. But again, this session will be recorded and feel free to share it with your colleagues. Feel free to share any of the resources that I follow up with in an email. And let me know if I can help answer any questions, or I'm happy to come to your departments and share more information that's specific to your program needs. Um, and outside of that, I will let you all go, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.